Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Look, I said we're going all in on AI when
it
comes to our 4 o'clock hour today. Alphabet just reported we got that news just now. Caroline Hyde and Mandeep Singh joining us. Microsoft's GitHub agreeing to bake artificial intelligence models from Anthropic and Google into a coding assistant used by millions of software developers. And then there was that Wall Street Journal report earlier today, Carol. Elon Musk's XAI is in talks to raise funding at a value of $40 billion.
Yeah, that's real money. So much of the reason we are talking about AI is because of Geoffrey Hinton, Nobel Prize winner in physics for work in AI, known as the godfather of AI. He was on the most recent episode of Wall Street Week with David Weston.
These big AI systems create subgoals. Now, the problem with that is if you give something the ability to create subgoals, it will quickly realize there's one particular subgoal that's almost always useful. So if I have the goal of just getting more control over the world, that will help me achieve everything I want to achieve. So these things will realize that very quickly. Even if they've got no self-interest, they'll understand that if I get more control, I'm going to be better at doing what they want me to do. And so they will try and get more control. That's the beginning of a very slippery slope.
A slippery slope indeed, perhaps. Our next guest worked with Geoffrey Hinton developing the Boltzmann machine. It is the first learning algorithm for Muller neural networks. And if you're scratching your head, you're going to get an explainer in just a moment.
We're very pleased to have Dr. Terence Sanowski with us today. He's Francis Crick Chair at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, distinguished professor at the University of California at San Diego. He's also president of the Neural Information Processing Systems Foundation. He joins us from San Diego. His new book is out. It's called Chat GPT and the Future of AI, the Deep Language Revolution. Terry, good to have you with us. Congratulations on the book. You have been thinking about this stuff for more than 3 decades at this point. I think a lot of people have been talking about it and thinking about investing in it for 2 years at this point. Are you just saying every day, finally, people are taking seriously what I've been looking at for a generation?
Well, it's great to be here, to have this opportunity. My book launched today, and I'm really excited about it. I think that what's happening right now is really, unbelievable in terms of the breadth and the depth and the excitement. And so I was there at the beginning. Geoffrey Hinton and I collaborated in the 1980s. All the learning algorithms that are being used today for these large language models and deep learning were developed by us back in that era. And of course, what we didn't have back then were computers that were fast enough that could scale up these models to be, to be able to solve these very difficult problems in artificial intelligence. But you mentioned the Neural Information Processing Systems Foundation. I'm the president. We organized the biggest AI meeting, and in December, we're expecting 16,000 researchers to descend on Vancouver. Right after, by the way, Taylor Swift. She's the big headliner on Sunday, but we have the rest of the week.
So I want to ask you, how did you think about neural networks and large language models in the 1980s? How do you think about them today?
Well, we actually had a premonition that these large language models, I should say not the large, they were small language models back then, were really good at language. And that was a particular project, a summer project for a graduate student in my lab called NetTalk, which was trained on a dictionary to be able to pronounce English text. If you give it an article from the Wall Street Journal, and they would pronounce it in an understandable way. And this in linguistics is a very difficult problem because English is so irregular. There are a lot of regularities, but you also have irregularities, and then you have rules for the irregularities. But it really was amazing that a small, tiny network with just a few hundred units and tens of thousands of weights, the parameters, the connections between the units, could do that. It was like an amazing compression of complexity. And now we know that these large language models, the deep learning networks, they love language, and they are capable of things that we never could have imagined.
Well, we're going to we have a few minutes with you now, and then we're going to come back and have even more time with you. But that's really what I wanted to talk about. The idea of super intelligent AI. Mm-hmm. What are we not thinking about? What's the threat out there?
So, my good friend Jeff is very concerned, and I think he's, one of the smartest people I've ever met. And if he's worried about it, then there's a concern. However, I think that even if you're concerned, it's very difficult to know when that's going to happen, if it ever will happen. And there are super forecasters out there, and this is from The Economist magazine, who are much better at people who are experts at predicting, if and when there may be a catastrophic or an existential threat. And it turns out that in fact they're not as concerned as the experts in AI. I'm happy that someone is thinking about the worst case outcome, because if not, then if it ever happens, we're in trouble. But right now, I'm more concerned about trying to understand how they work mathematically, and also to learn more from the brain. After all, these were designed back then. Jeff and I looked at the brain, the only existence proof you could solve any problem in AI. And, we tried to build something that was based on similar principles. So now we can continue. There's a lot more in the brain we can learn from.
But paint that picture for us, because I think a lot of people are worried about doomsday scenarios here. And if Geoffrey Hinton is worried about that stuff, I mean, we should be worried about it, you're saying?
I think that we should be cautious. That is to say, we should be constantly thinking along the lines that Jeff is, in terms of what could possibly happen, and be cautious and put in precautions so that it can't happen.
What?
Just to
go ahead,
finish
please.
the thought. What I'm really concerned about are the unintended consequences, things that you cannot predict. Something may happen that no one thought of, even Jeff.
Yeah, and we have learned, certainly, right? Great financial crisis, pandemic, like the unthinkable can happen, and you throw technology into it, and you just kind of don't know where it's going to go.
Exactly.
Okay, so now I'm terrified. Okay.
Don't be scared, Carol.
Terrence, don't go anywhere. We're going to do some news. I do wonder what?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question before we go.
Well, so, okay, we have a minute, and then we're going to take a break and come back. But I just do wonder, when you talk to people, do you say, wait, this is really going to be net a good thing?
Look, all new technologies have good and bad consequences. And you try to mitigate the bad, and you have to balance them, and right now, it looks like the good is way, way ahead of the bad in terms of the impact it may have on us and society and businesses. But, like I say, we have to be careful, because we don't really know where it's heading.
What worries me too, and we will talk about this maybe when we come back, I feel like we throw around a lot of words. Not you, but all of us in the general, whether it's AI, generative AI, and what it's and I don't know that we really understand what's going on. And so it's hard to know what it could possibly become. So we're going to pick your brain a little bit more, Terry, when we come back.
That's Terry Stenovec. He's Francis Crick Chair at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, Distinguished Professor at the University of California at San Diego, President of the Neural Information Processing Systems Foundation. The new book, out now, Chat GPT and the Future of AI, The Deep Language Revolution. More with Dr. Stenovec right after this.
I want to get back to our guest. We're talking with Dr. Terrence Stenovec. He is Francis Crick Chair at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, Distinguished Professor at the University of California at San Diego. He's also President of the Neural Information Processing Systems Foundation, and he's joining us from San Diego on this Tuesday. His new book, Chat GPT and the Future of AI, The Deep Language Revolution. I got to ask you, because I am still trying to understand, and I get worried that we throw these words around, certainly not you, but we, as we try to understand this, with not having full comprehension of what artificial intelligence, the large language models that we're talking about today, where it takes us. Is it as subtle and evolving and life-changing as the internet was for us?
So this is something that is emerging, and I have, since the book was sent to press in the summer, I have a Substack where I have tried to fill in with the new things that are happening, and I'm preparing something, a new 12th version the blog on the question of whether AI is overhyped or underhyped. And I've thought a lot about this, and I think that it depends on the time scale. I think that on the short time scale, it is overhyped. There's no doubt about it. There's just so much out there. I mean, every day the newspapers are filled with AI and your program. But I think in the long run, it's actually underhyped. I think the real change in the internet, for example, didn't occur within the first 10 years. It was much later. Again, unintended applications that emerge that have enormous impact on our lives, like social media. So I think the same thing is going to happen with AI.
But is it different? Like, I guess I'm like,
what do you mean? Like,
the internet is not, I wanted to say comfortable, but it's not, because there's some really bad things that happen, and we know that, right? And that's the battle we have with social media, and we want to talk to you about kind of regulatory oversight of AI in a moment. But I'm just trying to understand, it does feel so seamless and just such a part of everything we do. But it hasn't necessarily replaced a ton of jobs. It's created jobs. It's replaced some jobs, I guess you could say. I'm just trying to understand, like, on what scale do you put it? You mentioned the internet. So is it apples to apples, or is it something else?
No, well, first of all, it uses the internet. So I mean,
Right.
that's like the machinery that you need to reach to scale up and reach a large population. But it's more intimate than the internet in the following sense, that it talks to us, right? I mean, it's as if an alien landed on the Earth and could talk to us in English, and it knew everything about what humans, history, everything. And the only thing we can be sure of, it's not human. But it's really quite remarkable. Let me give you one example of something that I was really surprised at. When they did a study of whether people who needed cognitive therapy preferred real humans or AI, they preferred AI, which was really quite remarkable. I didn't expect that. And part of the reason is that the AI is not judgmental like humans.
Well, wait, but doesn't it depend on the data that, like we talk about?
It wasn't getting trained on judgmental data. Is
No,
that right?
It was, actually, it's a good question. What was it trained on? I think that it was fine-tuned with, data from real subjects that were talking with a doctor.
Wow.
But but even without that, I'll
Yeah.
tell you something again is shocking, is that it is actually empathy. These large language models can empathize with humans. And why is it? How is that? Well, it actually absorbed a lot of text out there, novels, letters, and Reddit and so forth, and where empathy was being part of the discussion, and so it absorbed that too.
Well, I wanted to hear a little bit of your thoughts on what we heard from Elon Musk a little earlier today. He actually participated in a surprise conversation at the Future Investment Initiative to discuss the future of AI.
It's most likely going to be great, and there's some chance, which could be 10 to 20%, that it goes bad. The chance is not zero that it goes bad, but overall, at one point, one could say that the cup is 80% full is one positive way to look at it, maybe 90%.
Okay, 80 or 90% positive. The question I have for you, Professor, is do we need an international regulatory body? Do we need the largest, most powerful governments around the world to create some sort of standard to ensure or help ensure that this goes the right way?
Well, as you know, in the UK, they've passed an AI Act, which is like 100 pages long and incredibly detailed, and it's already obsolete. It's AI is just moving, blasting forward, and you're trying to catch up with it. But I do believe that it's absolutely essential that it be regulated, and it should be regulated by people who are building it. As the government, okay, is in the business of protecting people, and we'll see how that plays out. But for example, molecular genetics, this happened back in the 60s, 70s. They had a meeting where they came together at a Silmar, and they came up with containment rules and regulations for doing experiments under the careful protection so that nothing leaks out, nothing gets out. And I think we need to do the same.
Okay. So when does, as you said, 10 years for the internet to really kind of make its impact and presence really known and maybe, integrated into our lives? So is it a decade before we see LLMs and AI at this level integrated into our lives?
We are at a stage that aviation was at when, at Kitty Hawk, the Wright brothers made the first flight. It was 10 feet up and 100 feet long. And that really was something that then took decades and decades to build. And the most difficult thing, by the way, that airplanes, design of airplanes had to solve was control. How do you make it go where you want to go without crashing? And that's something that, again, it's like what we're going through right now with AI. And yes, it will take decades. It's not going to happen overnight.
I know. It's kind of fascinating. We have a million more questions. Is it going to take all the jobs? Is it going to create jobs? Is it going to take jobs? Just got 30 seconds. And yes.
I get asked that question whenever I give a public talk, and my answer is that you won't lose your job, but your job's going to change, and you're going to need new skills, and it will morph over time. Now, these are people who are in the workforce now, but young people coming up, they'll have no trouble whatsoever finding new jobs in this new industry.
We got to get you back on the show, Dr. Stenovec. Really appreciate you joining us.
Can I just say, Terry, what we always want to know is people like us, anchors.
We don't have time for him to answer that question. We don't have time for him to answer that question, Carol. I'm sorry. I got to give the book a plug.
He will come back, hopefully.
The new book, Chat GPT and the Future of AI, The Deep Language Revolution. Dr. Terry Stenovec. He was there at the beginning. He knows it all. He's Francis Crick Chair at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, among many other things. This is Bloomberg Businessweek.